Hey everyone, and welcome to Voices of Veritas, a podcast made by the church for the church. I'm Ryan Hennigan.
And I'm Michael Bashaw. At Veritas Community Church, we believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ is at work in and through us, transforming all things.
On Voices of Veritas, you will hear real stories of gospel transformation, spiritual insights, and heartfelt conversations that seek to encourage us as we follow Jesus.
We invite you to join us twice a month to listen, learn, and grow in faith together.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Voices of Veritas podcast. I am your host, Ryan Hennigan, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Michael Bashaw. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing good, Ryan. I was thinking on the drive in today to record. We've been doing this podcast for 7 months now. We're coming up on the end of the year. We're recording this in December, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and I've enjoyed learning a lot about you and our guests. So I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, I'm good. I mean, I can't believe it's been 7 months. I, too, have learned a ton, and I've enjoyed doing this with you and learning about the church and having different guests join us and hear their stories. Hopefully the listeners have been liking it, so...
I hope so. I hope they're having a similar experience.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of learning about things, today we're joined with David Wituszynski. Did I get that?
You did. Well done.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
And David, you are a member of Veritas Tri-City, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Perfect. And you have been a missionary to Uganda for several years now.
Yeah, I joined my organization full-time really mid-2021, and I've been mostly in Uganda. I was in Cambodia for several months there in 2023. But back in Uganda now.
So I'm going to tell on myself a little bit, but Uganda is in Africa?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Well, we have you here today. Thanks for joining us. We actually had someone from Tri-City reach out and say, hey, David's in town. He really wants to talk about how things have been going in Uganda. And we told him about the podcast and he was interested. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you. When did you get back to the States and how long are you here?
Yeah, I've been back since mid-October. I have spent almost all of that time traveling. I've been to at least 9 different states, reconnecting with friends and supporters. And I will hopefully spend most of my remaining time here in Columbus, but traveling back to New Hampshire where my family is for Christmas. And I'm here until February, early February.
So you get the best of Ohio weather, January and February. It's like the peak.
Well, the thing about Uganda is that it's endless summer all the time. So it's great, but there isn't a lot of variety. So I get the variety here. And, I think I'll be here just long enough to be very happy to go back.
So maybe give us a little bit of background about yourself, David. Like, what company are you with? How did you get involved in missionary work?
Boy, how far back? How far back do you want me to go? I was raised in a church that was very mission-minded. So my parents have supported missionaries for as long as I've known them, my whole life. And it was definitely something that people talked about. Honestly, something that you kind of felt guilty for not doing, right? Which is a problem, but that was kind of the state that I was raised in, right? I on the other hand, was very good at math and science. And my dad, who is an engineer, convinced me to study engineering. I was privileged to go to some very good schools. And when I was in undergraduate, and I think this is a story that you'll hear from many people at my organization, but there's really a story of this desire for missions and ministry coming together with this desire to work in a technical field. So really for me, when I was getting my undergraduate degree, I started feeling convicted that God wants me to serve, right? And I'm studying engineering. Engineering feels like it should be a way to serve people, right? You're learning these very applicable skills. And started realizing engineers have those skills, but engineers are very expensive. That's why people want to be engineers. And the people who often need their services the most can't afford to pay for them. So I had this question, how do I serve the people who can't afford to pay? And I didn't have a good answer for it. Meanwhile, I typed engineering missions into a search engine. And when you do that, Engineering Ministries International is what shows up. So that's the organization that I work for now. I actually applied to do an internship with them back in 2010. And at the time, they had too many applicants and my field wasn't quite relevant enough. So I was not able to go with them.
What is your field?
Yeah, well, that's, and there's several answers to that question. My undergraduate degree was in chemical engineering, and then moved to Ohio to study ecological engineering. So now I work in research and development, which means I do a lot of electronics, which I had no background in. So really just being willing to jump into whatever's needed at this point.
So when you go on mission trips, like when you go to Uganda and your time in Cambodia, you're physically using your degree, is that right? Or
yeah, well, perhaps I should explain more about the organization and what we do. So Engineering Ministries International does engineering and architecture design and construction for Christian ministries around the world. They started back in 1982 in Colorado Springs, sending short-term trips of professionals. And in 1998, some folks really felt called to go overseas and start an office in India. And the story they tell is after spending 6 months in India, they wanted to redo everything they'd ever done, because it turns out that being in the context that you're designing for is really important for having designs that are appropriate. So over the time since then, we've expanded to have offices in 9 different countries, and about 200 staff in total. And last year we did 127 projects in 34 different countries. So that's a combination of, for example, there's an office in Uganda where I work. So that's mostly doing projects in Uganda. And then there's an office in the United States who are mostly sending people to do shorter term projects in other countries. So the office in Uganda functions not too differently from what you would think an engineering and architecture firm here does, right? We have clients, we're taking on projects, going to site, completing drawings. Now, there are folks like me who are mobilized from overseas contributing to that. But then there are also quite a few Ugandan design professionals as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we really value is being able to put those perspectives together. Kind of the Western experience, education, and standards in some ways, but then the Ugandan understanding of how things work and what's needed in Uganda, right? Physics isn't different in Uganda, but the things that a building is expected to do might be different. The climate is different, like the way that you're going to think about, how much of the time am I spending inside? Is my building open to the elements or not? That's going to be, and also what are people expecting out of this building? That's going to be different. So diversity is one of the core values of the organization, and it's got a very practical aspect to it because we want to be constructing things that work well. But then it's also got a deeply theological aspect to it as well, because we look at Revelation and see, this multitude from every tribe, tongue, and nation worshiping together. And we say, yeah, we want our organization to look like that.
Yeah. I can understand why context specific, like wanting to have boots on the ground to see what your project is needing to be. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I'm going to back up a little bit. So you mentioned that you were raised in the church and you kind of had this context of like, I think your word was like almost like guilt, right? Of like needing to be involved in missions. Like, is that why you like eventually kind of had this trajectory of like, well, I need to find out a way to use my degree for service?
I don't think the guilt.
Okay.
So just to be clear about that.
Great.
I think God brought me on a much healthier track. Actually, there's a story I tell about that, which is I went on my first missions trip while in university with the organization that used to be called Campus Crusade for Christ, and they do a program each year where they bring college students down to Panama City Beach and witness to people on the beach, right? So this is my second year in college. I was friends with a bunch of people in crew, and they invited me to this, and I like took a flyer to be polite, right? Like, nah, this is not my social group, right? But God strongly convicted me that I should go on this thing, like very much against my will. So eventually got to me, right? And I went, and it was a really beautiful week of me seeing God working not through my strengths, but despite my limitations, maybe even through my limitations. And I got back from that week and said, wow, that was amazing. I wonder if I should go into full-time ministry. Like that was a really positive experience. And the next week I had a problem set for my engineering class, and I finished the problem set and said, that was so much fun. And that's not normal. So if God has gifted me in this way that I really enjoy doing this work, I should probably use that. I should be an engineer. And it wasn't until 2016, so 6 years later, I was burned out on grad school, decided to take some time off, and my advisor graciously allowed that. And I remembered EMI, and I thought, oh man, I bet I could spin myself as a civil engineer, right? I've taken enough classes to kind of, instead of a chemical engineer, it's more difficult to see how that integrates into their building designs, but civil, okay, we can make that work. And I ended up interning in the Uganda office for 5 months in 2016 in the middle of my graduate school. Not what you expect to be doing, right? And it was, that was a fairly transformative experience. It was really fun. The work felt really meaningful. It was meeting all of these different ministries that we were supporting. An unexpected thing was that turns out that missionaries are just normal people, right? And being able to connect with them and peek into their lives and see that, that was really encouraging to me. So I asked a lot of annoying questions about why we did things the way we did. And that kind of validated my desire to be in graduate school. But also they started answering those questions with, well, we're starting a research and development department in the Uganda office. And I started thinking, boy, I'm getting this PhD. I don't really know why. I don't really have plans for it. And maybe it's so that I could come back and work in the R&D department with EMI. So I graduated in 2020. My plan was to stick around Columbus and work in industry for a while and gain experience, and then eventually move overseas with EMI and support them. 2020 was not the best time to find an industry job. It's never a good time to find an industry job if you have a PhD and no work experience, which I did. But then COVID made it extra hard. And I had reconnected with EMI and they said, nah, you should just come. And that was very challenging for me. I didn't want to. I'd just been in school for all of my life. I wanted to take it a little bit slower, enjoy time with friends, not move halfway across the world during a pandemic. But again, God just kind of pushed at me for a couple months, and all of my reasons for not going started to feel like excuses. And eventually it came down to, do I feel called to do this? And the answer was yes. And can I do this now? And the answer was yes. It's like, okay, well, if you don't go, you're procrastinating. So let's go.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, your passion is pretty evident. And I think that has to be something that is almost a requirement for the type of work that you decide to go into.
Let me take a second, and I want to talk just a bit more about EMI, because we have these 3 core values that I think we really do define us as an organization. And those are design, discipleship, and diversity. So I've already talked some about diversity, doing this backwards maybe. But discipleship is something that we hold very strongly as a value. And for us, that has both a spiritual and a professional component. So spiritually, we are investing in our staff and in our interns. We have a very robust internship program that I've been able to be very involved in, both as an intern and now as a staff member who's helping to manage it. So we have usually 6 to 8 interns twice a year, majority of whom are Ugandan. coming through for professional and spiritual training. We make everybody live together. So there's this great cross-cultural experience, but we're also having them do Bible studies together and have spiritual mentorship with our staff. And our hope is very much that that is raising up technically excellent and spiritually mature people to send into the Uganda design and construction industry. So it's not hard to find those people, but we very much want to push them to not just be nominal, right? But to be really committed to the mission of Jesus and his church in their everyday life, which I think EMI is just a fantastic place to figure that out. And then that last core value is design, which is the easiest one to talk about because we're engineers, right? It's like what we do. It's why we're not here because we don't like design. So the design context of Uganda, Uganda is growing rapidly. I should maybe fact check this. My understanding is that half of the population is under the age of 15, and that's been true for the past decade at least. So lots of young people, population growing rapidly. Most of the projects that we do in Uganda end up involving schools in some way or another. It seems like no matter how you get into serving in Uganda, you end up building schools because you just have all of these children and they need education. So that means a lot of demand for infrastructure. And their education is highly valued in Uganda. There is a limited capacity for higher education. A lot of people leave the country for university. There is a limited job market for people returning and limited wages. So it's very common for people who've studied abroad to stay abroad, which that means that one effect is that the technical professions are perhaps less developed than they are in the United States, right? There's also inconsistent enforcement of building codes and regulations. So you get a lot of informal or less formal design and construction. And especially if you are a ministry who is perhaps funded by a U.S. organization that doesn't know the system, it's very easy to get a subpar design. We hope not a dangerous one. That's a possibility. But one that is not meeting your needs very well. So EMI sees our role as being able to deliver technically excellent designs that enable the ministry to pursue their mission and their vision. For example, one of our longtime clients is Gem Village, which is an orphanage for children with severe special needs in Uganda. So children that have been abandoned that no other facility in Uganda is able to take care of. So God has called them to care for these orphans very clearly, and they are fantastic at it. He has not called them to manage construction projects, right? So that is something that he's called us to do. So we're able to come alongside Gem, catch their vision, and then translate that into infrastructure and manage the construction process for them. It's a huge privilege to be part of what they're doing, and to kind of take that portion of the work upon ourselves and then see them flourish with the resources that God's given them as they stay focused on their main task. And then integrate the discipleship and say, we hope we are then raising up the next generation of engineers and architects and construction managers to work with excellence in their fields and to integrate their faith into that as well.
Talk to us a little bit about Uganda, like just your experience there. What's it like? How does, especially with EMI and their goal of trying to be in the context in which they're working, what is that context? What's that look like?
Yeah, boy, those are great questions. I'm suddenly very nervous about misrepresenting the entire nation of Uganda. So I'll do my best, but this is one perspective from one person, right? So Uganda is a country in East Africa on the northern shore of Lake Victoria. It's on the equator. The weather is amazing. It's on the equator, but it's a kilometer up. So it's just like 70 to 85 most days. It's just great. And the people are extremely friendly. It is a Christian nation. 86% identify as Christians. So you get all the pluses and minuses that come with that, right? Where it's a very open country. We can very easily evangelize, but there's also a lot of nominal Christianity as well.
The fact that you are using your education, your skills, like that is, in so many ways, what we're called to do is to use our gifts, and those gifts can be wide and deep. And I think here in the States, when we think of mission fields, sometimes we think of very specific, limited ways of sharing the gospel with another population. But this sounds to me like a much more practical and then more influential way too, because you're actually going there to meet the needs, the very practical needs of the population. You mentioned that the population is about 50%, perhaps under the age of 15. Do you know why that is?
I mean, Ugandans do have a lot of children. I've been meeting with people, I've been trying to think of people I know who have fewer than 4 siblings. I'm sure they're out there, but families are large.
Wow.
So
that blew me away. And then your stat about the 86% Christian too. That was surprising to me.
Yeah, Uganda was a British protectorate for a while, so the church had, I think, very effective evangelization during that time. But again, you see kind of as in the United States, right? Or perhaps more so than the United States, there's a cultural reason to be Christian.
Yes.
So very, very easy to be a nominal Christian. There's also the prosperity gospel is very big in Uganda.
Really?
As in the United States, I would say that the 2 or 3 fastest growing churches in Kampala are to some extent prosperity gospel. Some of them to very, very worrying extents. So definitely a discipleship need there as well. But also a culture that very openly claims the gospel and claims to be Christian. So it's a different context to work in. I think the kind of the traditional missionary image I had in my mind was that I'm like going out into the wilderness to an unreached tribe and planting a church. And that's like not at all any part of my context. I live in a capital city, work in an engineering firm, and serve in my church. And try and in some sense not too different of a life that I would have here, but very much trying to serve people in this context with the things God's given me.
So outside of you being a member of Veritas, how does Veritas partner with you in particular, or maybe EMI more broadly?
Yeah, there are a couple ways. The church supports me financially, and many folks within the church do as well, and through prayer as well, which is so needed, right? And also just having ties here. I definitely feel like this is a community that I can reach out to for support. There are challenges that come with living outside of your home country. And now EMI is a fantastic organization. I have a lot of trust in them that's based on the time that I've spent with them. But knowing that I'm not just kind of out there by myself, that there's a group of people who love me and support me from the States means a lot to me. They've checked in with me periodically to ask if I need anything. I know I've been able to engage a couple times over video with folks. And there's like a formal way in which that happens. And then there's an informal way as well, where many of my closest friends attend Veritas and provide a lot of emotional and spiritual support.
I would love to hear like what a typical, I don't know if there's a typical day in what you do in Uganda. What does a day look like? Can you paint a picture for us of your day-to-day work and ministry, and also like what are some challenges specifically associated with working in Uganda that you've maybe been surprised at or had to learn to acclimate or address? We'd just love to get it kind of in the weeds here a little bit about what your work looks like on a detail level.
My work is actually a little bit different than maybe the main work of EMI because I'm in research and development. So kind of the usual EMI staff member is designing or constructing something, and I am causing trouble by asking people if they can do that in different ways. Kind of the way one of the ways to think about it is we very deliberately brought these people from different perspectives together because we believe that there's a lot of value in combining those. When you do that, questions come up, right? And engineers and architects solve problems. They try and solve some of those questions, but there are some questions that need more sustained attention or that would benefit from more sustained attention. So the regular designers, if you will, have deadlines to meet because we've got clients who need things constructed, and that's very appropriate. But research and development has the opportunity to select some of those questions and say, let's spend time on this. Let's actually do some experiments. Let's do some more extended calculations and see if we can come up with something that can be implemented across many different projects to improve the affordability or the appropriateness or the sustainability of our designs. One of the projects I've done was a first flush diverter design for rainwater harvesting systems. So we have many clients who want to harvest rainwater from their roofs, it's not a good thing to rely on that as your primary source of water. But sometimes if you don't have a lot of other options, it can be a good supplementary source. Usually when you do that, your roof is dirty, right? Just in general. When it rains, the rain will clean the roof, but the first amount of water that you collect will be dirty. So what you want to do is not collect that first amount and collect the rest. So it's common for a rainwater harvesting system to include some kind of first flush diverter to capture that first amount and let the rest flow into a storage tank. So we had constructed kind of a campus-wide rainwater harvesting system, which we had never done before, for a primary school that the Amazima Ministries International was building in Jinja, Uganda. And because our architects wanted everything to look nice, they had us put it underground. So we had never done that before either. So this was constructed in 2020, and in 2022, they told us that the water quality was very poor that they were getting out of that system. So we spent a while looking at the way we had designed that first flush system and trying out different piping configurations to say, okay, if we put 2 diversions, is that going to improve the water quality, and by how much, right? Or if we add extenders or floating seals into it, and really came up with some recommendations that ranged from make sure you insert the pipes in this direction because some of them are directional, to okay, if you've got a really really high velocity system, then maybe you'll do a more involved system with a floating ball to seal off the diversion. And that is now design guidance in our manuals for all the times that we build those systems, right? So you asked about my regular day. The way that usually works, I live in Kampala, the capital of Uganda, on the southern edge. Our office is about halfway between there and the airport in Tepe. It's about 40 minutes away. So I leave home around 7. There's a carpool that drives from my compound where several other EMI families live to the office. I do bicycle sometimes because it's the only way that I can get exercise into my life. So I've got an electric bicycle, which I highly recommend. Best form of transportation there is. So I'll bicycle sometimes, but sometimes I'll carpool. The work day is 8 to 4:30. We usually start the day with devotions or prayer for half an hour, worship on Fridays. The day itself could have a lot of variety in it, depending on what projects we're pursuing. R&D tends to stay near the office. We're not going on a lot of trips to sites because we're mostly asking questions and conducting experiments. Office provides lunch, which is usually some Ugandan American fusion, cooked by our wonderful cook, Carol. Could have a lot of things going on in the evenings. I've got a small group at my church that was somehow leading for a while. So that happens some evenings. At one point, I was regularly rock climbing with a friend at a quarry nearby. It gets dark fairly consistently at 6:30 to 7 most days, and light fairly consistently at 6:30 to 7 because we're on the equator. Travel is usually more difficult after dark. I guess one of the challenges is that travel in general is more difficult in Uganda.
Why is that?
It's a combination of bad roads, a lot of traffic, and then people generally don't like traveling at night because they think it's less safe, which I guess means it is less safe. Yeah, there are just challenges as well with living in a different culture, which some of them are as simple as, man, I'm really hungry and I don't have the energy to cook. Like, what do I eat? Right? And that the answer to that is different in Uganda than it is in America. I can't just go to Little Caesars for a $5 hot and ready. Like, that's not a thing. So
yes. Well, I just want to ask one particular question on the food there, which usually Ryan is asking the food questions, but I'm going to today. What's like one of your favorite Ugandan dishes? Can you describe the cuisine and like how has that been? Like, you said no Little Caesars over there, so yeah.
Ugandan food. Well, okay. So we've been talking about Uganda as if it's one culture, and it's not. There are 40 different tribes in Uganda, 40 different languages. They are related. So there are maybe a couple major groupings, but there's still a couple major groupings in there. So I'm going to answer as best as I can. This is mostly based on the central region where I am. But Ugandan food is typically a starch, or better, several starches, with a sauce over the top. So the sauce is protein and or vegetables. The starch could be rice, it could be potatoes, it could be sweet potatoes, it could be cassava, it could be matoke, which is like a not at all sweet mashed banana. So you cook it and mash it. The closest thing is mashed potatoes, but it's not that, that is very popular in central and western Uganda. Several other starches, but not bread. Bread is not food. Bread is snack, which is something that is not friction really, but a point of difference that we observe. I once made my Ugandan housemate soup and bread for dinner, which I was really excited about. And after he ate it, he went and cooked something else because it just wasn't like he didn't not eat it, but it just wasn't enough for him. Where his body was like, nope, that's not food. Yeah, and so the sauce could be any meat or beans or peanut sauce, fish, or sometimes just vegetables. My favorite meal is definitely roasted pork. Uganda does roasted pork better than anywhere I know. And that could be skewered over fire, like marinated and skewered, or they do one where they deep fry it and then serve it with kind of a mess of tomato and cabbage and whole cooking bananas. And you're supposed to eat it with your hands. It's the right way to do it.
So you eat with your hands?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Yeah, and it's like a communal plate here. You're getting this with several other people.
So I'm curious, more specific to your work with EMI, what's like a story of like success? I mean, you mentioned kind of like the first flush water system, which I found fascinating because that's, especially, here in the West, I feel like there's a huge emphasis on being environmentally friendly. And if I could see people, like I know people who would be like, man, that would be cool to have like a roof water rain collection system. But like, what's a story that you're like, yeah, when I think of success in the Ugandan mission field, this is what I think of?
I have maybe two answers for that. One is very research and development specific, because I think one of our most successful projects was one where we conducted tests of different roofing systems and the impact on indoor temperature underneath them. And this was one of the first projects we did. I actually wasn't involved in it at all. And it was because our office was hot, right? And the department is just starting out, and the office leadership is like, maybe you can make our office cooler. So we did some tests and found out that the air is actually fine, right? The air temperature in Uganda, at least to someone from the temperate Americas, it's just great all the time. Ugandans are wearing winter coats when it hits 60, but complaining that I'm in short sleeves. I'm like, you guys just don't know. You don't know how cold it can get. So the air is very pleasant, but you're getting a lot of radiated heat from the roof, which can get quite hot in the sun. So we tested all kinds of different systems with different colored roofs. Most of the roofs that we design, at least, are metal, like an aluminum zinc coated steel. And in Uganda, those are often painted maroon because from a distance, it looks like clay tile, which means the house is fancy. At least that's my personal opinion. So the color of the sheet can matter quite a bit, but then putting even a thin foil barrier underneath can reduce the temperature inside quite a bit. So we've got kind of a data set that we curated out of this. And I think that has impacted our designs, possibly more than anything else R&D has done. As far as an EMI project, the most feel-good project that's come out recently is the GEM Inclusive Playground. So I've mentioned the GEM Foundation before, an orphanage for children with special needs. So we've been building their campus since 2019. A couple of years ago, they came to us and said, okay, we've got housing, we've got a clinic, we've got some transitional housing for the children who age out of the orphanage, but we haven't done anything just for fun. And we really want a playground that the kids can enjoy. So my colleague Hannah Aronson somehow got like two of the most prominent inclusive playground designers in the United States to come and volunteer on a project to design and install this playground. And it is really cool. And one of the key things was this isn't a playground for special needs kids. It's a playground for everyone. Everyone can play together. Because of our specific expertise, we were able to empower the GEM Foundation to serve the church in the way that they are. And that just feels like a unique combination that God just put together.
That's really special. Not too long ago, we had Emily Billings on our podcast. She is, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she leads up the Disability and Inclusion Ministry at Veritas. And just hearing kind of her outlook on how, like you said, this isn't necessarily for special needs kids or for people with disabilities, but this is an all-person approach, right? And we're incorporating everybody into the life of the church, and to see and hear stories about that being done even overseas. I mean, back to God using people's, passions and gifts, like getting the two most prominent, playground designers in the United States to come over and help design. That's fascinating. I find that really encouraging. So one of the things at least I have heard, I've done a few short-term mission trips myself. I've heard from other people who do short-term missions, that one of the things that they think about a lot is burnout, Yeah. And so let me back up and just say, one of the things I'm hearing from you, which I think is honestly really cool, is this consistent theme of like being in the place where the ministry is happening. And that's not short-term. I mean, you've done this for several years. You're doing this for a living, kind of like you've said before. It's kind of similar to what you would be doing here in the States, right? You have a job, you go to a church, you have a community. So that's not short term.
No.
But I'm sure you still face burnout or still think about burnout. So how do you address that in your personal life and with EMI or even just in general? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Obviously, burnout can be a problem no matter where you live. There are some unique stresses that face cross-cultural workers in a different country. I think EMI has done a good job of acknowledging that and just giving me permission to say I'm feeling burned out, right? And to investigate and not to overextend myself. And then I think the church has done a good job of supporting me and saying, yeah, we want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and have the things that you need. So for me, I think there are a couple, maybe a couple different scales to think of, right? There's kind of a daily, if I am trying to serve out of my own ability and my own effort, I am going to burn out, right? I need to be constantly reorienting myself towards God and saying, I am not here to earn anything. I am not here to win or prove anything, that's definitely a temptation, right? I'm a missionary, right? I have to be X, Y, and Z. Very natural to judge yourself on the outcome of your ministry. I have to constantly be saying, I'm here because I think God wants me to be here. I'm here because I'm seeing God here and I want to be where God is. And no matter what else happens, that's what has to ground me. I talk about this as if I'm great at it. I'm not, right? Like this is a struggle, and every so often I'll wake up and be like, oh no, like where have I been looking the past week or the past month? And need to be pointed back towards God. I need other people to point me back towards God. And yeah, I mean, just like you, regular rhythms of prayer and worship and community are really important for that. There's then maybe a larger scale where I have my supervisor checking in with me every so often. I've got my friends in the States checking in with me and asking how I'm doing. And it's up to me to be honest with them, right? But I have people that I can be honest with and tell them, yeah, I'm really struggling with this. And then listening, which also I'm not great at this, but listening if they say that's concerning, like you need to do something differently. And then maybe an even larger scale is my organization expects me to return home every so often. So that's why I'm here now. I'm on home assignment or furlough or whatever you want to call this. And that is deliberately a time for me to re-engage with my community. You can debate about how restful it might be, but it certainly is restorative in a way. Maybe not now I'm getting lots of sleep way because I'm traveling all over the place connecting with people, but definitely restorative in other ways.
Well, if we can just zoom out from when you first went on mission to now, what is like the big picture, or I guess maybe a better word is the arc that you observe in yourself in your spiritual growth, the skills, the experience that you gained from being in Uganda, and what wisdom would you share with people here back home who are listening to this right now? Just would love to hear some insight, if you have any, about how you've grown over the last 4 years and seen God at work in your own life.
Yeah, that's a great question. I probably should have been more prepared for that. So I might flounder for a little bit here. I mean, there's a sense in which I've grown just by growing, right? By trying to be with God, whether that's in Uganda or not. I certainly appreciate the perspective that I've gained from having friends in different cultures. That was one of my big goals the first time I went overseas, was I want my perspective on the world and on the church to be a little bit more holistic, a little bit less tied to the American, I don't know, perspective, but their constraints, right? my experience of Christians abroad is that they're generally looking with a larger view on things. I would encourage people that not all of the things that our culture says is important is actually important everywhere, right? And that's a hard discernment thing, because there are things that are important, right? And there are things that the Ugandan church thinks are important that in America you'd be like, I don't know if you should be spending all your time on that, right? And then, you know, I've got my own blind spots as well, still not claiming that those are all gone. I think I've certainly seen God's provision in new ways. So I raise support for my salary. So I'm going around asking people to give on my behalf, which is humbling and challenging, but seeing God provide that way has been really transformative for me.
Well, I love the shedding the light on the ethnocentrism of Americans, but certainly the church here, where that we have the blind spots of when you step out of that Western bubble, in a sense, I'm sure you can see the differences about, okay, what's important everywhere, what's not important.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to imply that you need to go overseas to do that, right? Mm-hmm. I think you can do that by, well, first of all, there are plenty of foreigners here that can help you gain that perspective. So there's an encouragement for you to go out and make friends from a different country. There's a lot of value to that. But also there are lots of thoughtful Americans who are engaging on those things.
You've mentioned the prosperity gospel, and you mentioned that there are some things that the American church would say is important that the Ugandan church would say is not. And Uganda would say this is not important, and we would say this is. Is there an example?
I'll say this, and it's a little bit of a cop-out because it's something I've heard other missionaries say, so I don't need to own it 100% myself. But the divisions that we hold to within the church, they matter less when you leave. There are divisions within Uganda. You've got the Catholics, the Protestants who are Anglican, the born-agains who are everyone else, the Baptists who don't seem to be in any of the lists, but we're still there. And then, you know, here we could talk about, you know, Pentecostals and Methodists and, you know, Presbyterians and all of that. And you just see those things not mattering less maybe, but being less of a thing that pulls people apart and more of a thing where we say, oh, you're from a different tradition. I can learn something from you, right?
So is it less prominent, or is it just less divisive?
So it's different things are prominent. If I'm talking about the American church and the Ugandan church, right? We divide up differently. But I think once you've moved between those two spaces, it's easier to say, oh, those differences, they should not divide us. So I've given you maybe a vague answer.
No, I appreciate it. Michael might be one to tell you, like, I enjoy I enjoy getting into like the uncomfortable topics, because that's where I find people are more genuine. So I appreciate the answer that you gave.
I mean, honestly, I would say the prosperity gospel thing, that's a point where I would say we need to talk seriously about divisions, right?
Yes.
There's my personal thing there. And I would want to say that in the United States as well. Mm-hmm. And to maybe point out that it might not be as obvious to us as a pastor who's selling holy rice that if you eat it, you'll be blessed. But I'm sure there are many people in America who are serving God out of the expectation that they'll get something. And just thinking about what in my own worldview have I dressed up in Christian clothes, but is not actually Christian. Like I've bundled this in with the gospel and it doesn't belong there.
One question I think I'll end with, kind of circling back to more your personal story of how you got involved in missionary work. For people who are maybe discerning, should I be involved in missionary work? I mean, you made a good point earlier that you don't necessarily have to go overseas to, encounter different cultures or live on mission. I mean, I highly agree with that. Yeah. But specifically in the context of foreign missions, if somebody is trying to discern, kind of like you said earlier, maybe the guilt versus the like, okay, no, this is actually what God is trying to do. My excuses are feeling more like, disobedience, I guess.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to those people who are trying to discern that?
Being on mission doesn't necessarily look like I'm going out and preaching the gospel on the street corners. In fact, for most of us, it probably doesn't. But there are many, many ways that we can contribute to the mission of the church. And I appreciate Veritas kind of showing many of those ways. That's one of the things that attracted me to the church at first. So if you're discerning going overseas, first I would tell you, well, you don't need to go overseas to be on mission. You don't need to be a formal missionary to be on mission, right? I think the people who stay here are just as much involved in the work of God as I am. I just get the privilege of being sent by the church and funded by the church for a specific task, right? Kind of a, I don't know, loophole in the economic system that I get to exploit. It's great. An idea out there that says, well, you shouldn't ask if you're called to go, you should ask if you're called to stay. I don't really like that. I actually think in, what is it? Oh, I'm forgetting which letter now. In one of Paul's letters, he actually says the opposite. He says, everyone should stay in the position they were when they were called. That doesn't mean God doesn't call you out of that, but it means that it's not bad to stay where you are. But I think an equally important thing is to say, if you are not going because you are afraid, right? Which that's a very reasonable thing. Moving overseas is frightening, right? But God might be calling you to a greater level of faith and saying, hey, he can provide for you. As I get older, I get the feeling that the will of God can be broader than just here's the one specific thing I need to do right now. So if you are discerning a call to move internationally, the will of God could be broad enough to include that call, and it could also be broad enough to not include that. And I would suggest talking with current missionaries, going on a short-term trip, seeing how it is, and not being afraid to try it. If you really think, yeah, God might be calling me to do this. I did that internship back in 2016, and then in 2021 I only signed up for 2 years. And my reasoning at the time was, if in 2 years I decide to stay, I'll have a good reason for it. And if I don't, then I'll have been obedient to God, and that's what matters here. So it's maybe not I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I feel again, there's this image of the missionary where you pack your coffin with your things and go overseas. And there were people of amazing faith and faithfulness and perseverance who did that back in the 1800s and the 1900s. That's not the world we live in anymore. I can be on a plane and back to the United States in 24 to 32 hours, depending on my layovers. I can get vaccines for most of the diseases overseas, right? You do need to sacrifice your entire life to God, whether you stay or go. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to live in Africa for the rest of your life, right? So I would want to take some of the pressure off, thinking oh man, this is the rest of my life on the balance. Maybe not. The question is, what is God calling you to do right now? What's the next step?
I appreciate how you said that, because I definitely agree with your vision, the way you outlined our understanding, our image of a traditional missionary. But yeah, it might not be your entire life. But well, I mean, just personally, David, I just want to say thank you for the service you gave to the kingdom, and I think it's interesting what you do and how you do it, and I'm glad you can tell your passion for it is definitely there. Thank you so much for joining us today and just telling us a little bit about you and about your work. And we'll definitely be praying for you and for EMI and the people you partner with in Uganda.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you, but also very much the opportunity to serve in the way that I do, which is only possible because Veritas and many of the people within Veritas partner with me to do it. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, David. We appreciate it.
Well, that'll do it for us today on the Voices of Veritas. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.